A library is supposed to be the quietest place in the world. For 11-year-old Marcus Webb, it was the last place he would ever be safe. The Harwick County Public Library closed at 8 o'clock on Thursday evenings. By 8:15, the parking lot was empty, the lights in the reading rooms had been dimmed to their overnight setting, and the only sound was the low hum of the HVAC system pushing recycled air through the stacks. Most of the world had somewhere else to be. Penny Slade did not. At 31, Penny had been the evening shift supervisor at Harwick County for 3 years. Before that, and this was the part she never mentioned at staff meetings or potluck lunches, the part she kept folded up tight somewhere behind her sternum. She had spent 7 years as a Special Operations Combat Medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment, 2 deployments to the Kunar province and 1 to northern Mali. She had been decorated twice and medically separated once after a vehicle-borne IED outside Jalalabad left her with a reconstructed left knee, a titanium rod in her right forearm, and a recurring dream about the color orange that she had long since stopped discussing with the VA therapist in Raleigh. She wore reading glasses now that she didn't need. She kept her dark hair pulled into a loose bun that made her look exactly like a tired librarian pushing 30, which was precisely the point. She had a quiet voice and a habit of straightening books on carts while thinking about something else entirely. The other staff found her pleasant in a vague, forgettable sort of way. Her supervisor, a cheerful man named Gordon, described her in her last performance review as steady and unassuming. He meant it as a compliment. Penny had smiled and thanked him. Tonight, she was locking the periodical room when she heard the side door open. The side door, the one off the loading dock, the one that required a staff key card, was supposed to be sealed from the outside after 7:30. Penny went still. The periodical room was at the end of a narrow corridor, and the sound traveled clearly. A single quiet click, then the soft, deliberate footsteps of someone who did not want to be heard. One set of footsteps. Then, a moment later and more frightening, a second set. Heavier, slower, following. Penny set down her key ring without making a sound. 3 weeks earlier, the Harwick Courier had run a front-page story about a 17-year-old named Danny Reese who had been shot to death behind the Sunoco on Route 9. The story mentioned that a witness had come forward. It did not name the witness because the witness was a minor. What the story did not mention, what almost nobody in Harwick County knew, was that the witness was Marcus Webb, 11 years old, and that he had been placed in a quiet protective arrangement pending a grand jury appearance in 12 days. His mother worked the overnight shift at the county hospital. His older sister was a sophomore at NC State. The U.S. Marshals had decided that low visibility was better than a formal safe house for a child. Less paperwork, less attention, harder to track. What someone had decided instead was to track the boy's schedule. Marcus came to the library every Thursday evening for a tutoring program that ended at 7:45. He was, by habit and routine, the last student to leave, and tonight, somehow, he had not left. Penny didn't know any of this yet. What she knew was that someone had come in through a locked door, and that they were not alone. She moved to the corner of the periodical room and peered through the interior window that overlooked the main floor. The library's overnight lighting cast everything in a flat, institutional gray. She saw Marcus immediately. He was crouched behind the circulation desk, his small frame pressed against the back panel, his knees drawn to his chest. He was not moving. He was barely breathing. He had the particular stillness of a child who understood, without anyone having to explain it, that he was in serious danger. The man came into view a moment later. He was perhaps 45, heavy-set in the shoulders, wearing a county utilities uniform. The tan shirt with the embroidered logo, the dark work pants, the steel-toed boots. He carried a clipboard in his left hand. In his right, pressed close against his thigh, in a way that the clipboard partially concealed, was a short-barreled revolver. He moved through the stacks with the practiced ease of someone who had done this kind of work before, turning his head slowly, methodically, checking the gaps between shelves the way a person checks the rooms of a house they know by floor plan. He was not a county utilities worker. Penny pressed herself flat against the wall and breathed through her nose. Her left knee, the reconstructed one, had a tendency to ache in cold weather. Tonight it was fine. She noticed that the way you notice small mercies when larger things are at stake. She had two options. She could get to the administrative phone at the front desk and call 911. Harwick County Dispatch was good. She knew because she had called them once before, 2 years ago, when she'd found a man unconscious in the men's restroom. Response time to this building, which sat on the far east side of the county, was between 7 and 11 minutes on a clear night. The man with the clipboard was perhaps 60 feet from Marcus Webb. She did not go to the phone. What Penny did instead was take a slow, thorough inventory of the periodical room. She had been taking unconscious inventory of rooms her entire adult life. Exits, obstacles, tools, lines of sight. Most days it was simply background noise. Tonight it mattered. Against the far wall, a heavy oak dictionary stand wheeled, with a broken caster that made it drag. A folding table stacked with bundled periodicals, each bundle held together with wide plastic zip ties. A banker's lamp with a long, heavy cast iron base, 3 metal shelving units, bolted to the wall studs. And, on the bottom shelf of the reference cart beside the door, a half-empty can of WD-40, and a box of long wooden matches left over from the staff birthday cake someone had made for Gordon in February. Penny picked up the lamp. She came out of the periodical room without a sound, moving along the interior wall in the deep shadow cast by the overnight lighting. The man with the clipboard was in the children's section now, working his way methodically toward the circulations desk where Marcus was hidden. He still hadn't seen the boy. Penny could see Marcus's sneaker, just barely visible beneath the edge of the desk panel. A half-inch of white rubber sole in the gray dark, and she understood that the man would see it in approximately 45 seconds. She changed course. Instead of moving toward Marcus, she moved away from him, toward the far end of the fiction stacks, where the emergency exit sign threw a thin red cast over the carpet. She let the heavy base of the banker's lamp knock against the metal edge of a shelving unit. Not hard, just enough. The man's head snapped toward the sound. He turned away from the circulation desk. "Hello?" His voice was calm, professionally neutral. "Anybody still in the building?" Penny had already moved. She was 3 rows over in the biography section, setting the lamp quietly on a low shelf. She picked up instead a heavy hardcover, a 2-volume collected history of the Civil War that she had reshelved herself that morning, and placed it on the edge of a cart. "Library's closed," she said, pitching her voice toward the exit, away from herself. The sound carried strangely in the empty stacks. "You'll need to come back tomorrow." She heard his footsteps change direction. "Ma'am, I'm from County Utilities. We have a reported gas line issue in this building. I need you to come with me right now. It's not safe." Gas line. She had heard better. She moved again, silent, circling behind him through the oversized print section. From here, she could see his back. She could also see, now that he had moved into better light, that the County Utilities uniform had a small ink stain on the left breast pocket that did not match the laundering of the rest of the shirt. It was a fresh stain on an old shirt. The shirt had been sourced quickly, worn once, and not checked carefully. Professional operators didn't make that mistake, which meant he was good, but not the best, which was information. "You'll need to sign in at the front," Penny said, from a completely different position. She heard him pause, recalibrating. He was good enough to know she had moved. "Ma'am, this is a gas emergency. Please come out now." "Sure," Penny said. "Give me just a second." She had reached the reference cart by the periodical room door. She picked up the WD-40 and the box of matches and put both in the deep pocket of her cardigan. Then she moved to the far end of the reference section where the building's electrical panel was mounted behind a gray utility door she had propped open 3 weeks ago when the overhead fluorescence kept flickering and never relatched. She opened it now. The man heard the click of the panel door and moved toward it. Penny was already gone, stepping through the shadow along the back wall toward the circulation desk. She got there in 4 long, silent strides, crouched behind the desk, and found Marcus. He looked up at her with enormous dark eyes. He didn't speak. She put her finger to her lips. He nodded once, a small, controlled movement, and Penny understood that this was a child who had already spent some amount of time being carefully, quietly afraid. She leaned close to his ear. There's a storage room behind the reference section, second door on the left. Handle sticks, you have to lift it and push at the same time. Go in, lock it from inside, and don't make a sound for any reason. Do you understand me? Marcus nodded. Don't come out until you hear police. Not a voice telling you it's safe. Police. Sirens, radios, the whole thing. He nodded again. He didn't ask who she was or why she knew what to do. He simply moved, low and fast along the back wall, disappearing into the shadow toward the reference section. Penny watched him go, then pulled the silent alarm, mounted under the lip of the circulation desk. A small gray button she had pressed once before during a training drill and hoped never to press in earnest. Dispatch would send someone. The question was how long. The man came around the end of the stacks. He saw her immediately. She was standing in plain view behind the circulation desk, her hands on the counter, her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She looked exactly like what she appeared to be, a tired librarian working late. Oh, there you are. He smiled. It was a practiced smile, the kind that was meant to be reassuring, and instead landed somewhere slightly to the left of it. Ma'am, I need you to come with me right now. We've got a potential methane issue and the building isn't safe. Sure, Penny said. She did not move. Can I see your county ID? Not the clip-on, the laminated one with the photo. His smile didn't change. I left it in the truck. Standard response protocol. We don't always carry them during emergency. That's funny, Penny said, because county utilities workers are required by state code to carry ID at all times during active service calls. I know because we had a burst pipe last spring, and I asked the same question then. She paused. What's your employee number? He stopped. The smile faded by 1 degree, the clipboard lowered slightly. Ma'am, you're also holding a Smith & Wesson Model 36, which is a pretty unusual tool for fixing a gas line. The man's hand came up. Penny had already moved. She did not run. Running in the dark in a building she knew by heart, against a man who was larger and armed, was not the right move. What she did was sweep the heavy wooden card catalog tray off the end of the circulation desk. It had been sitting there for a month waiting to be repurposed into a display and throw it at his head. Not to hit him. To make him flinch. He flinched. The revolver went wide for 2 seconds. She used the 2 seconds. She vaulted the desk and went low, inside his arm, and drove her palm hard into his nose with the heel of her hand, the way she had been taught at Fort Benning by a very calm sergeant who had explained that the nose was full of nerve endings that did not care how large or committed a person was. The cartilage gave. He made a sound that was more surprise than pain, and his head snapped back, and in the half second when his eyes watered and his grip loosened, Penny took the revolver. She stepped back. He stood in front of her, blood running freely from his nose onto the utilities shirt, his hands at his sides. On the ground, she said. Her voice was exactly as calm as it had been when she was shelving books. He didn't move immediately. He was recalculating. She could see it. He was heavier than her by at least 60 pounds, and he had, until 30 seconds ago, been the one with the gun. He was deciding whether the math still worked. I did 2 tours with the 75th, Penny said. I've treated gunshot wounds in a ditch in the Kunar province by flashlight. I am not afraid of you, and I am not nervous, and if you make me shoot you in this library, I'm going to be genuinely annoyed because I'll have to fill out the incident report. He got on the ground. She kept the revolver on him, and she was considering her next move. She needed something to secure him with. The zip ties from the periodical room were 60 feet away, and she was not willing to go retrieve them with her back to him, when the side door banged open again. 2 men. Different build from the first one. One tall, in a dark jacket with a collar turned up. The second shorter, broader, moving with the deliberate forward lean of someone who expected to find a room that needed to be controlled. Both had weapons drawn. Penny processed this in a single second. She was in the open. She had 1 revolver with an unknown number of rounds remaining, no cover, and Marcus was in a storage room 40 feet away. She moved. The tall man was closer. She dropped behind the circulation desk as the first shot came. It hit the wooden paneling 3 inches above her shoulder and sent a spray of splinters across the back of her neck. She didn't stop moving. She crawled hard along the back of the desk, reached the end, and came up in the gap between the desk and the reference shelving. The tall man had come around the left side of the desk. The shorter ones was coming around the right. She had perhaps 4 seconds before they had angles on her from both directions. Penny pulled the WD-40 from her cardigan pocket. The ceiling of the Harwick County Public Library was a suspended tile system, which meant that the fluorescent light housings were exposed. At rectangular metal frames with plastic diffuser panels, running in rows down the length of the building, the nearest housing was directly above the reference cart, approximately 8 feet overhead. The housing had been flickering for 3 weeks because one of the electrical contacts was loose. A loose electrical contact, under the right conditions, threw a small, intermittent arc. Penny stood up from behind the reference shelving, aimed the WD-40 nozzle at the ceiling above the reference cart, and sprayed a long, sustained burst of highly flammable petroleum-based lubricant directly at the light housing. The tall man fired. The shot went through the space she had occupied a half-second earlier. She was already moving left. The WD-40 hit the loose contact. The result was not dramatic by Hollywood standards. There was no fireball. What there was a sudden sharp crack of arc discharge, a small concentrated flash of ignition where the aerosol cloud met the electrical contact, and then a fast, bright chemical fire running along the spray pattern across the ceiling tiles. Smoke followed immediately, white, acrid, and dense, the kind that synthetic ceiling tile made when it burned. The fire suppression sensor above the reference cart was not a sprinkler. It was a heat-triggered halon suppression unit installed when the library received a grant to protect the rare book collection 17 years ago. Penny had read the maintenance report. She knew because she read every maintenance report. The halon discharged with a sound like a pressure vessel failing, a heavy industrial hiss, and the reference section filled instantly with a dense white fog of halon gas, dropping visibility to approximately 18 inches. She heard the tall man cough. She heard the shorter man say something urgent and unintelligible. Penny was already at the storage room door. She knocked twice, paused, knocked once. "Marcus, it's the librarian. Don't unlock it yet." She heard nothing from inside. Good. He was following instructions. The halon was dispersing through the building's HVAC system, which meant the fog would clear in 4 to 5 minutes. She needed to be in a defensible position before it did. She moved back toward the circulation desk, keeping low, and listened. The taller man was coughing steadily. Halon was not toxic in short exposure, but it was deeply unpleasant to breathe, and it was disorienting in darkness. The shorter man had stopped moving, which was more concerning. Then she heard the exterior door again. 3 knocks, rapid and deliberate. Then a voice, muffled through the fire door. "Colfax County Sheriff, we have a report of shots fired. Anyone inside, identify yourself." "Deputy." Penny's voice cut clearly through the halon haze. "Librarian. 1 civilian secured in storage, 3 armed men, 2 still mobile. I am unarmed." She set the revolver on the floor and slid it away from her. "I am behind the circulation desk, coming up now with my hands visible." She stood with both hands raised. The exterior door came open hard. 4 deputies in tactical vests flooded the entry, with flashlights cutting through the dissipating halon fog. Behind them, she could hear the radio chatter of backup and the distant, growing sound of more units pulling into the parking lot. The first man, the one in the utilities uniform with the broken nose, was still on the floor where she'd left him. The tall man in the dark jacket was found 3 minutes later in the geography section, coughing into his sleeve, his weapon on the floor 6 feet away, where he'd set it down during the worst of the halon discharge. The shorter man had made it as far as the emergency exit, before a deputy coming around the east side of the building found him trying to pry open the crash bar. All 3 were in handcuffs before the halon had fully cleared. The supervising deputy, a compact, careful woman named Lieutenant Adair, stood at the circulation desk and looked at Penny for a long moment. Penny's cardigan had a burn mark on the right sleeve from the flash ignition. Her reading glasses were still on her head. She was otherwise composed. "You want to tell me what happened here?" Lieutenant Adair said. "There's a boy in the storage room," Penny said. "He should come out first." She walked back to the storage room and knocked twice, paused, knocked once. After a moment, the handle jiggled, lifted and pushed the way she had shown him, and Marcus came out. He looked at Penny. He looked at the deputies. He looked at the halon residue still drifting in thin white wisps through the reference section. "You blew up the library," he said. "The halon is perfectly safe," Penny said, "and the ceiling tile damage is cosmetic. Gordon is going to be upset about the card catalog tray, but I'll talk to him." Marcus looked at her for another moment. "Are you actually a librarian?" "Yes," Penny said. "But before that, I was something else," she said. Lieutenant Adair, who had been listening, looked at the burn mark on Penny's sleeve and the very careful, very controlled way she was standing, and decided not to ask the follow-up question. The three men were identified over the following hours. The one in the utilities uniform had a prior federal conviction for witness intimidation in a case out of Forsyth County. The tall man had a connection to a logistics company that was already under investigation by the state AG's office in connection with the Danny Reese shooting. The third had no prior record but had 3 burner phones and a text chain that the sheriff's detective described at the scene as a significant problem for several people who are going to be very unhappy tomorrow morning. Marcus Webb testified before the grand jury 11 days later. He was composed, clear, and precise. The defense attorney attempted, during preliminary proceedings, to argue that the library incident had compromised the integrity of the witness. The judge disagreed. Penny Slade was back at the circulation desk the following Thursday by 4 o'clock. She reshelved 2 carts of returns, fixed the flickering light housing in the reference section. The maintenance crew had replaced the loose contact but left the trim panel slightly misaligned and was eating a sandwich at her desk when Gordon stopped by to ask about the card catalog tray. "I'll replace it," she said. "You don't need to replace it." Gordon sat down across from her. He had the look of a man trying to figure out how to say something. "Penny, the sheriff's office called me. They said you disarmed someone. They said you were the one who set off the halon system." "The contact was already loose," Penny said. "I just used what was there." Gordon looked at her for a moment. "Who are you?" Penny took off her reading glasses and set them on the desk. "I'm the evening shift supervisor at Harwick County Public Library," she said. "I've been here 3 years. I have a good retention rate on the summer reading program, and I am very organized." Gordon considered this. "Okay," he said. He stood up. He paused at the door. "The card catalog tray, Penny. You really don't need to replace it." She put her glasses back on. "I know," she said. "But I will anyway." Outside, the parking lot was filling up with the quiet, ordinary Thursday evening traffic of people returning books and picking up holds and bringing their children in for the tutoring program that ran until 7:45. A library is supposed to be the quietest place in the world. Most days, Penny Slade made sure it stayed that way.